Hi there, welcome to another episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast. I'm Scott Martin, and what a week it's been in bonsai for me. I've loved it, really have. Been flat out. Believe I'm at the end of my refined black pines now, which is really good news. Small cheer for me. And now I've moved on to Scott's pines. They're done. Well, the refined ones are done anyway. And then last but not least, I'll start moving into the other trees, which is my radiators, that sort of thing, which take a little bit longer. Some of those are massive. Some of those are really big trees. So I think there'll be one making it onto the YouTube channel pretty soon-ish, thereabouts. So keep an eye out for that. But this week on the podcast, which is episode 22 for the year, can you believe it? Oh my goodness, I can't believe that we're most well and truly into June. Start of winter is upon us. It's definitely chilly. It's bloody cold. It's freezing. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, please enjoy it. And if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, then we've got things that we have to do with our trees prior to the repotting period. Anyway, I want to talk in this episode of the podcast about design and what we see as beautiful and a few little cautionary tales about that, which links to a post I did on social media recently with the Japanese black pine with a hanging branch, which was brilliant. I loved it. I love the communication that came from that and the engagement. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. I want to talk about when you cut something off, how you can reassure yourself that it's the right thing that you've done and that it's not all bad. And got a real life story from in the workshop with something on those regards as well, and also that as you work on your trees, you're going to get quicker as time goes on. So, I want to talk about that in the podcast. All right, so get yourself a cuppa, settle in, get ready, and let's do this. Bonsai design, it's not something that you'll hear me talk about very often. I find it very, very personal. For me, it's the ultimate. It's my heart on a sleeve when I design something. It's how I want something to look. And one of the hardest things that you can possibly do is put yourself out there in an exposed way to show the rest of the world. You do develop a kind of a thick skin, I suppose, and more confidence in what you do. But it's also very daunting, and I wanted this part of the podcast to talk about that and how we all have a responsibility to be very mindful of when someone does present something to us, that we have to be very careful how we interpret and comment and display ourselves when we're talking about that tree with someone else. You've got a heart on a sleeve. You've got someone really exposing themselves to you and in a format of a show or social media or whatever it might be, then you've really got to be so careful as to how you let yourself be expressed. And you wouldn't want to inadvertently hurt somebody. And it can be gravely hurting too. You can really, really kick them to the core when you go in and you sort of talk about things being wrong, being right, whatever. And you don't have to, I suppose I want to make the point that it's not always necessary for you to see the beauty in the bonsai that's presented in front of you, because someone does. And they wouldn't have put it there if they didn't think it was beautiful. Unless it's a stolen tree they've nicked off someone else's social media and trying to flog your trees off it. But seriously, when someone does present something, they're obviously saying, hey, this is pretty good, and I would like to show the world, and I'd like to expose myself and say, hey, what do you think? And that sometimes what do you think may not be an open slather request for you to come out with guns blazing as to what's always wrong with it. I get asked my opinion all the time on trees, all the time. And I'm so mindful that the request comes from a place of goodness, and the answer comes from an amazing place of trying to help and care and nurture and open up possibilities for somebody. It's never a place of, oh, that's crap, let's move on, cut it in half and do this or do that with it. It's like, Okay, so there's something there in the tree that you've presented that you want to talk about, or you want to say, hey, is there this or is there that, and that's cool. And I always think that as the person at the other end, which can be you, it can be you, and how you're asked to be involved with somebody with their design of their bonsai. I think that you've got a real responsibility to take on board and say, what is it you like about the tree? What feature of the tree do you like? Do you enjoy? What's the best part about how you think this tree can develop? The Japanese black pine that I put on to social media on Facebook and on Instagram on the account showed a hanging branch with an option of removing it. And I'll just go into a bit of story about that because I haven't really responded to anyone's comments on Facebook because they're neither right nor wrong. Whatever anyone's written, I don't necessarily disagree or 100% agree with any of the comments that are on there. It's very personal, and if you think that branch should have been removed, then 100% it should have been removed. If it was your bonsai, go for it. If you think it should stay and it's your tree, then it definitely should stay. If you think it should be twisted around from the back and do this and do that, well then that's cool as well. Like there's definitely nothing wrong with any of the comments that were put on there, and I wanted to commend. Like I'm smiling now because it made me really happy. When I did that, I thought, you're opening up Pandora's box here. This could go really pear-shaped. It could go horribly wrong where you ask for people's opinions on something like this. And it's daunting. But I'm really pleased. I'm really happy that the Bonsai Love of anyone that was on that post that's part of Bonsai Matsu was flourishing. It was really good, and it made me really proud. It was like a proud parent moment to think that, yeah, it's working. This is great. We're being positive, and there was no uproar. Sometimes I get on to different posts on the platforms, and you see some of the comments and some of the negativity and the aggression, and I just think, oh my goodness, I just hope that never happens to anything that I do, because I just don't know what the outcome would be. And hearty debate's one thing, like getting passionate, being driven, that's one thing, but being just mean and nasty and horrible for the sake of it, because you're hidden behind a keyboard where nobody can get hold of you, and you're unaccountable for what you do. That's not the way it can be. And you can have really strong opinions. I have really strong opinions, and often I'll keep them to myself, because I know that the old adage, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. And that applies all around the world. And if you say something from a place of assistance or being really kind to someone, sometimes it can still cut pretty deep. It can still hurt, and it can still knock the wind out of that person's sail. So anyway, I just wanted to reiterate. I've talked a bit about design before, but I just want to say that design is really personal. There's boundaries on what we can do. There always is. You know that. Like, horticultural boundaries on how things are done. But when it comes to the design of the tree, given those parameters that we have to work within to keep a tree healthy and alive and thriving, the design, the next phase of it, it's really personal. And a lot of times you're restricted by what the tree presents in front of you, and there are options of manipulation of grafting and all that sort of stuff. They don't really enter into my toolkit a lot, because I like to work with what the tree's got and maybe play the longer term game where I'll build health and I'll look for back budding, and I'll start to develop a tree from that path. But I just wanted to push that respectful part of what we do and the responsibility we all have. It's great, and it doesn't matter whether it's your mate, your dad. It doesn't matter if it's someone across the other side of the world that you've never met and you never will meet again. You've got a real responsibility to make sure that you continue that bonsai love and that passion, and everyone that puts their hand out for you, see it as a real opportunity and a sign of respect that someone else wants to ask what you think. It's pretty powerful, and it's awesome. And to come back to the Japanese black pine on social media, what am I going to do with it? Let me tell you the story. So I've had that tree for quite a while, and that branch, the tree, when I first got it, was all up. It was all vertical. So I smashed everything down, brought it all down for step one, start building some structure on the tree, removing things. There's a big shari line, big dead part on the trunk that was there from the way it's been grown. I think after it's been dug from the ground way before I got it, where the root system wasn't strong enough, and it's just been chucked out into a hot environment before the root system could get the fluids flowing up and down the trunk. Very common. There's a batch of these trees around the place that I see quite regularly, and they're all starting to age quite nicely now. And when I looked at that tree, I looked at the rest of my collection, and I wanted something a little bit different. And I had the opportunity with it to grow sacrifice branches, because I wanted to thicken things up a little bit. And as that sacrifice branch started to develop, I let it grow further and further, and I suddenly thought, hey, that looks not bad. It was a long lion's tail, for want of a better word, where the foliage is all extended out towards the tip of the sacrifice branch. And I remember way back when, a long time ago on social media, I put it up there, and someone said, it'd be great if you could graft a branch right in the centre spot of that extension, because then it would look really great. And seriously, without a word of a lie, the next spring, a little bud appeared in that area, and I thought, well, this is meant to be. This is something that I can look at running with and starting to develop and play the long-term game with it, rather than grafting a branch there or cutting it back and regrowing. A bud appeared. It's almost like the bonsai god said to me, "This is what we want you to do." And I looked at it and I thought, you know what? That looks really cool. I like the negative space that forms from the hanging branch. I let the bud develop and widened it a little bit, put a bit of movement into it, brought it down, and those pads have to develop. I think that when I look at that tree, I don't see the picture that was presented to the world. I see where the pads have pushed out maybe 5 or 10 years down the track, and they're a lot more significant, and the needle length is more uniform across the whole tree. And on that hanging branch, there's probably 5 or 6 different pads at least that have developed, that have grown maybe from one or two origin points. They've been allowed to grow and develop and expand further, which is quite common for how I do my black pine. So for now, it's keeper. I wanna see where it goes. Not because I don't think cutting it off would be a great option. It would be beautiful. I'd still love it. I would definitely love that tree if I cut that branch off. And that's what I mean. Like the comments about it being right or wrong, there's no right or wrong. Not at all. It's all right. It's all good. It's all great. But I'd really like to see where that plan takes me. And having sat on it for a lot of years now and seen things slowly develop, I think I'd shortchange myself in the tree by not seeing it to fruition. Does it mean it's not going to get cut off somewhere in the future? No, I never say never. I mean, things may change. The whole plan may change. There may be a variation agreement on that tree, but for now, I'd really like to see where that develops after so many years. And I'm in no rush. I enjoy the process, so let's see where it goes. Okay, so the next section of the podcast. This is talking about how to reassure yourself when you've cut something off to make sure it was the right decision. Because once you cut it off, it's pretty difficult to put it back on. So, and this came from a real life story in the workshop recently. And Michael, if you're listening, you'll know I'm talking about you, because we had an Australian native come in, a sticky wattle. And it's getting ready to flower. There's lots of foliage. Look great. And in maybe another month's time, when all these beautiful light yellow flowers open all over this drooping, weeping foliage, it would look absolutely magnificent. But there was a real structural flaw with it. And let's go back to, I think, episode 1, 2, 3, 4 of this podcast. 5 years, 6 years ago, whatever it was, however many years ago, and talk about good structure is good bonsai. And when you make a compromise on something, sooner or later, you have to rectify it. You can't sit on it. You can't leave it because you will look at that bonsai and you will know that something's not right about it, and that you have to make a change, and that things need to improve, because your bonsai eye grows and develops and becomes better, and these flaws that maybe at one point or another when you first acquire these trees or you first start working on them and you bypass it and you go, you know what, the rest of it looks great, so I'll just ignore that part of it. Let me tell you, that little part that you ignore is going to become like a flashing beacon, that every time you look at it, you're going to go, something is wrong with this part of the tree. And you'll start then putting into the second tier of your bonsai. There'll be your favourites and your second favourites. And then it'll suddenly go from your second favourites to, I can't be bothered with that now. Oh, it needs a repot. No, not this year. Leave it next year. Because you'll just keep moving on. And as you get more and more advanced and better at bonsai, and your journey starts to really accelerate, and you start to thrive and grow and develop, there'll be that niggling issue that you should have dealt with a long, long time ago, that by the time you do come to deal with it, it's going to be a massive thing to do. And it's hard. It's really hard. I understand how hard it is to cut something off when it's your tree. I've said it before and I'll say it again. When I see a tree come in front of me, I make a split-second decision based on what I think is best in my opinion, and if I'm asked, then I take action. If I just get asked for an opinion, what would you do? This is what my concern is. Taking into account all that stuff I just talked about in the first section of the podcast, then I would offer an opinion. I would say, look, I'd think about this, and maybe don't do it now. It's major, drastic. Think on it, sleep on it, get your head around it first, make sure it's going to be right, and then start to look at it. And, you throw the old tea towel over or paper or something over that section of the tree, and you start to envisage what it's going to look like. You start working with photos on your phone where you're deleting sections of the tree, and you're getting all this excitement and external noise about what should happen with this tree. But sooner or later, you've got to make a decision. And to his credit, Michael was you were very brave, mate. It was good, because having looked at this tree, I'll explain the tree to you. So it's sort of like it's a weeping variety of tree, not cascading, but it's a weeping, like a willow type thing. And if you know the Australian natives, or even if you don't, jump onto the interwebs and search for Australian native sticky wattle. It's an acacia. It's lovely. It's got beautiful little flowers. It's got very drooping foliage, which looks great. The growth on it is really, really interesting. It gets a beautiful shape to it, and very natural looking. And this thing sort of went up in an informal upright sort of look, and then right at the top, it's split into two sections, two main leaders, for want of a better word. But the tree splits into two parts, and then from those two parts, they broke apart into small branches, and then it sort of weeped in a very circular fashion. So from a distance, beautiful trunk movement, hidden then by the foliage of this tree was a lot of the structure, but it just looked really nice, and it was good. It was a good significant sized tree. I'm sort of guesstimating it was around about maybe 30, 40 centimetres, something like that. And the issue with it was, where these two trunks started to split apart, they were wrapping around each other. So there was no forking, there was no division where these things were growing apart nicely. There was a wrapping where they were almost coming into contact with each other, and then they sort of wrapped around the back and then separated. So it looked like it was twisted almost, or partly twisted, and it was funny. And there was no way that you could rotate that tree around to change the front of it to an acceptable front where those two trunks didn't look like they were wrong. We tried everything. We absolutely tried every single thing that we could, rotating it around, even if it meant, pigeon breasting where the trunk went away, went towards you and then came back, or whatever it was. It just didn't work, and something had to be done. One of them had to come off. So there was two. One was a really dominant thick one, and the other one was a little bit lighter. So the decision was a split call. It could have gone either way. You could have removed the smaller one and stuck with the bigger one, kept a little bit more foliage on there. But we went for the gutsiest one, which was to go to the smaller one because it meant there was a greater taper coming up on that. It accentuated the movement of the trunk as well, and it meant that this branching structure that was left really looked nice. But the trouble with it was the big one had the key amount of foliage on it. Like it was probably 65, 70% of the foliage was on the bigger one. And so by removing that, it would have meant taking a hell of a lot of foliage off this tree. So, I talk about the 1 step forward, 2 steps back. It would have been, 1 step forward, probably 4 or 5 steps back. But when you break it down and before you make the cut, you've got to think about the plan and the vision and where this tree is going to get to and how good it's going to be in future. Like, do you want it to be brilliant? Do you want it to be the best bonsai in the world? Or do you want it to just be a nice tree? Because neither's wrong, but it plays a massive part in the cut that you'll make or the decision you make because there's a compromise. All right, there's a time where you'll have to look at that and go, geez, I wonder if that would have been better the other way. And anyway, so we talked about it, we thought about it, gave him some option to say, go home, think about it, make a decision, don't make it now. I know it's dramatic, I know it's drastic, I know it's serious, and I know that your partner loves the tree the way it is, so cutting off 60, 70% of this thing is going to make you get in a bit of strife when you get home as well. So you need to really make sure that you've locked this in before you go ahead with it. Anyway, left him, walked around the rest of the workshop working with other people, and he goes, you know what? Bugger it, I'm going to do it. I've looked at this thing for so long. I'm knowing something's wrong with it, and we've got to take that step. We've got to go forward with this tree. And I said, all right, big trunk, little trunk. And he goes, let's go. Let's keep the little trunk. Let's cut the big one. Let's make the most serious move on this thing to future-proof it, to set this thing up for massive success in the future. So we did it. I grabbed the large branch cutters, and before he could change his mind, whipped this thing off, and while it was drastic, it was a lot of foliage that had to get removed off this thing. It was the right decision. 100% it was the right decision because as soon as it was removed and we discarded that part of the tree and we looked at the trunk and the new structure that it had and the taper it had put into it and the movement, it was beautiful. It's really nice. Does it need more development? Yeah, it does. It definitely needs more development. But I think by doing what we did with it, it's been put onto a path now which is far superior. Like it's a far improved version of what it was, all by taking that gutsy step forward and making sure it's right. But what you've got to do, and that's what this section of the podcast is about, is being brave. That's one thing. But having a plan, having a vision of where the tree's going to get to, working out what the cost is going to be for when you do these things. But the best thing of all is when you do cut something off, reassure yourself by looking at it going, wow, that looks amazing. And that happens very frequently. Where I'll get in and I'll cut something off and I'll have the branch cutters on. I'll go, cut. I'm certain. And I'll put my hand in front of it and I'll go, is it going to look good without it? And then I go, yeah, I've got to cut it. And sometimes you'll see it on the videos I put up on YouTube. I'll grab a piece of foliage and I'll pull it out of the way and I'll work around it and then I'll let the foliage go and I'll grab it again and I'll pull it back down and I'll start getting used to what the tree's going to look like without it, and then I'll cut it off and I'll go, that looks really good. That's a real step forward for that tree. There's been times, I admit, where there's been an instant regret when I've done it, but it's always something that you can work beyond. You can always get past it. But just reassure yourself. Once it's, take the time to look at it and go, that's a step forward. Yeah, it might not look like it right now, but by removing that section of the tree and having that courage to fulfill the plan and making sure it's correct before you do it, seeking advice, making sure the person you seek advice from is the right person to give you reassurance or an honest opinion about something. And honest opinion doesn't mean kicking someone in the guts. It just means when it's an honest opinion someone wants, you frame it as an honest opinion and be honest about it. But yeah, by having the courage, this this little sticky wattle, I think, is going to be an amazing tree in years to come. So it's the right thing to do. And while I'm talking about Australian natives, I saw an email come across my desk recently for the Victorian Native Bonsai Club. And I've talked about them before, and I reckon they're one of the best bonsai clubs ever going around. They've got a lot of massive database of information on Australian natives, and Australian natives are brilliant. No matter where you are around the world, I'd strongly encourage you to get involved with them. And anyone who listens to the podcast knows my thoughts on them. I reckon they're 100% should be part of everyone's collection. Anyway, on the 31st of August this year and 1st of September, they're doing the 10th symposium on Australian natives as bonsai. And if you can get to it, if you're around, I'd recommend looking it up and getting involved, because I went to the first of these, obviously a long time ago, and it was brilliant. It's life-changing and opens your eyes to so many different things when it comes to Australian natives as bonsai. So I'd strongly encourage you to get involved. I unfortunately won't be there because I'm up in Cairns at that point with the Cairns Bonsai Club. So I'm really looking forward to that part as well. But anyway, the Victorian Native Bonsai Club, 10th Symposium, Australian Natives on Bonsai. Check it out. So I've been working a lot on pines lately. A lot of needlework, a lot of repetitive work. A lot of work which really hurts my wrist at night when I go to bed from using tweezers and plucking needles and whatever else that goes with it. So I just was thinking about it the other day, and I want to talk about in the podcast that as I was working on a particular tree, a black pine, a Makawa variety, which is very dense, very small needles, very small growth, and every year it seems to do my head in, and I get a little bit anxious about working on it before I work on it, because there's so much to do, and every year it more than doubles. You know, the 1 to 2 scenario, that's out the window for this thing now, because the pads are so full that, you know, I've really got to start looking at cutting it back further and opening things up, and you know, I'm not looking to double the foliage on this thing every year because I can't. There's nowhere for it to go, and it gets so thick and dense that if I don't spend the time on this tree, then those inner areas start to die off, and that's a real short-term sort of issue, but long-term it's disastrous. So I've got to make sure that I spend the time on this thing and I get in there, and it's always the same. I try and have it where I do this tree when I've got a day at least. I've got time locked away where I've cleared my decks. You know, there's no admin work. I've got nothing that I have to do, nothing that's urgent. I try and do it mid-season for my pines as well. So I know I've got plenty of time at the other end for everything else. If I did it at the end, I think I'd be stressing, saying, there's no way I can get this thing done as well as everything else. So I've got to have it where mentally I'm strong. It sounds ridiculous, but there is just so much work on this tree that I know that I've done it before, where I've cut corners and I've breezed over this thing and I've made it look nice and fluffy and really good, and the photo looks great. But deep down, I know, you know, maybe there's wire I haven't removed. Maybe there's, you know, it's a bit too thick. What about that inner area? Have I cleaned out all the dead needles, or have I just made it look good and flown over this thing in, you know, 3 or 4 hours and then put it back on the bench and gone, yep, next. And I know I'm guilty of that. I'll put my hand up and I'll say, yep, that's me. I know I've done it. So I refuse to do that now. I refuse. So I had a good hard look at myself and a good hard chat with myself, and I said, what have you got to do to enjoy this? And I've got to clear my decks. I've got to make sure that I've got everything else done. Anyway, so did that this year. Whack through, you know, I looked at the tree at the start and I thought, well, to be happy to do that one, the trees around it on the bench, even though it's just, you know, it's not all my trees, if I look at that part of the bench where that's sitting and there's another 10 or 12 or 15 trees around that particular tree, get all those done first so that it looks like that's the last tree that you've got to do. And it sounds crazy. When I say it out loud, I feel like I've got, you know, an issue. But really, it feels like that to me, that if I can play these little mind games with myself, that I can do it. And anyway, I did it. I worked on all these other trees, you know, small, big, mediums, whatever. Got them all done. Some were more advanced, some were less refined, so they'd be easier. And I got them all done. I went, right now, seriously, give yourself the next 2 or 3 days on this thing to work on it, because you've got so much time. You've got so much left in the season that you don't need to do any more of these pine trees. You can have so much time, it's not funny. Righto, cool. You've got so much time, go and get yourself a coffee. Put your feet up and relax. Anyway, so I grabbed this thing, put it on the bench, start working through it. And as I started working through, I was very slow and methodical, because I was as a touch on the nervous side, because I really love this tree. I really, really love it. And every year it gets better and it means more to me. And, if you've got bonsai, you know what I mean. Like every year they become more part of your soul and more connected with them. And I love the pot it's in. I love the way the bark's developing. I love every single root in that tree, and I love every single needle on that tree. And when I work on it, I start very slowly and I'm very methodical. And it's like the little caboose going up the hill. I feel like I'm very, very slow, and I think I can, and I'm slowly getting there, and I'm plucking, and I'm working on branch by branch, and I look at it, I think there's only 462 million branches left on this thing, so it's okay, just work on this one branch and keep working. And I do it slowly, and I work through, and I pluck, and I cut, and I pluck, and I cut, and I remove wire, and I get to the next branch. And I pluck and I cut and I pluck and I cut and I remove wire, and I get to the next branch. And it slowly gets faster, and my rhythm starts to improve, and my confidence starts to build on this thing as well. And I start going faster and faster and faster, to the point that where my needles or my branch work was taking, minutes, 5-6 minutes per little branch, I'm flying through it. I'm getting through these things in 30-40 seconds, where I'm really plucking needles super fast, and I'm making decisions that's going pop pop pop. Everything's sort of coming together, and I can see how if I cut this, that's going to open this up, and then that bud there is going to be allowed to grow, and then that's in the future going to come and fill this area of the tree, and then I move across to that area, and okay, that one's too close to that area, cut that one back and let that one grow, which means that one on that other side has to be cut off as well. And all of a sudden, everything I'm doing starts to blur. And I look at the clock, and I'm starting to work, and next thing I look at the clock, and it feels like a blink of an eye where I haven't stopped, and it's 2 hours later, and it's like, how good's this? This is great. Stop, have a rest, go get a coffee, get some water, whatever it is. Just draw a breath for a second, sit back, look at the tree from a distance, change your perspective. How's it look? Have you done enough? Have you done too much? Where's it going? What do you need to focus on next? Put the plan in place. But I can tell you that when I get back to that tree after that momentum shift, where I've got to the top of the hill and then I'm flying down the other side, I can work so much faster and I feel so much better. And next thing you know, I'm finished on the apex, and I'm moving on to the next lowest branch, and I've got that done within a blink of an eye. And I move on to the next one, start working on that one, and I try and get probably 3 or 4 extra branches done as I'm spinning this tree on the turntable. I'm going from branch to branch to branch. I stop, make myself have a break, see how much time's gone past on the clock, and it's invariably hours again. So while it feels like I'm flying through these things, it still takes a lot of time to get it done right. But doing it right and with good accuracy, and allowing myself to get my skill level exactly where it should be for the tree, and giving the tree my attention, and giving it exactly what it deserves for the great bonsai that it is. Sit back and have a look and see what you've got left to do. Do you need to stop? Are you starting to get tired? Is there need to come back to this thing tomorrow? Because you know what? You've done that whole part of the bench. You don't need to worry about it. And you've got so much time left to do the rest of it. And that's when something changes in me, and I start to really enjoy it. The process goes from being absolutely daunting to one of the highlights of any tree that I work on. And I come back to that tree, months down the track, and every time I water it and I walk past it, it's like, you've done a really good job. Oh, that's doing great. And then spring comes around, and you see the buds open, and you look at the inner buds that you left and you opened up, and you said, hey, this part of the plant is going to be this part, and it's going to do this, and it's going to do that. And yeah, it's doing it. The tree's doing exactly what you'd thought it was going to do, because your plans all come together nicely. And I think that if you can put yourself in that same scenario with your trees, allow your skills to get better. And it doesn't need to happen in the first 30 seconds of working on a tree. It can take days. It can take years. It can It can take hours, whatever it is. Just allow your skill to get better, and then as your skill gets better and that tree develops year on year on year, then let those skills kick in when you're doing it. And if you've got a tree that is not a problem's not the right word. If you've got a tree that's mentally draining for you, that you know is going to be a lot of work, don't rush it. Don't rush it. Just do it slowly. I talked about focusing branch by branch. Really, just allow your skills to develop branch by branch as well, so that as you get into it and you start getting better and faster and quicker at what you're doing, by all means, that tree is going to look better. And you can always review and go back over some of the work that you've done early where you're a bit slower, maybe weren't as quite as methodical about what you've done, but that skill that you've got, that you develop, that you nurture, geez, that comes back to pay dividends, I can tell you, because I still think about this black pine. I love it. It's perfect. It's future-proof for me. It's about 40, 45 centimetres tall. It's not very heavy. It's a single-person carry, so yeah, it's one of those trees that'll just be with me for the rest of my days. So anyway, build confidence knowing that as you do things, do them thoroughly, bit by bit, allow it to improve, and you'll get faster. And we're all human too. Well, folks, just like that, we are done. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for listening as always. You guys are the heart and soul of my bonsai world, and I cannot tell you how much, honestly, hand on heart, I love it. I love the engagement, and I love your trust in me, that you actually spend this time with me and that you ask me my opinion on things, because it means a hell of a lot. I know that if I was in your position on the other end, it takes a little bit to reach out like that. So I do take great responsibility for all of that as well. And I just strongly encourage you to do good, to be good in the bonsai world, and share that bonsai love, and really make sure that where you can, you nurture and you encourage and you build, because what's good for bonsai is good for all of us. The more people that love this lifestyle that we have, because I was going to say hobby, but it's nowhere near a hobby. It is a lifestyle. Well, for me, it is anyway. I live and breathe these things, and I think I've got akadama in my lungs from it. But it's a lovely thing that we get to do, and it's so good in so many ways. And everybody around the globe deserves to have a little snippet of this bonsai pie that we all share in and that we all love, and hopefully everybody gets maybe a millionth share of what I get out of it, because I feel extremely fortunate. Anyway, thanks for sticking around. I love this podcast. I love you guys. Keep an eye out for YouTube. There's more videos coming all the time. I know there's a Scots Pine, which is currently, as I'm recording this, currently uploading. Hopefully it's out by the time I'm certain it's going to be out if my Wi-Fi connection holds long enough before this podcast. So if you haven't seen it pop up on the YouTube channel, check out Bonsai Matsu YouTube channel and have a look and see what you think. Let me know. Subscribers, love you. As always, thank you. Lifeblood of this thing. And as always, until next time, happy bonsai.